Hi. Okay, so my name is Sabra Zullo, and I'm an MSW candidate. I am going to be presenting over Social Media 101 and navigating the digital world with your clients. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I went to Hardin-Simmons University to get my bachelor's in social work. I had a little bit of a unique experience. I started off at Goodwill, West Texas, and then I was moved in February of 2019 to Hendrick Medical Center. So in kind of in the middle of the year for my senior year, I switched gears and yeah, so I got two different internship experiences and kind of just rolled with it. And then my master's, I'm a master's candidate and I am still studying social work and I am actually an intern at Waco Center for Youth. So, some of the things that we're kind of going to discuss today is learning why it's important to educate your clients and parents with the most up to date information on social media, understanding COPA, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and how it affects the social work profession, discover how to utilize communication and awareness about dangers, strengths, and risks of social media, and discuss risks and benefits of how it's affecting youth in their social and emotional development. Lastly, identify ways to equip parents to dialogue with their teenagers about the strengths, dangers, and risks of social media. So, we're going to kind of cover a lot of stuff. So, what exactly is social media? It's considered to be a noun, and it is websites and computer programs that allow people to communicate and share information on the internet using a computer or a cell phone. I was able to get this definition from the University of Cambridge. I felt that it simplified what social media is, and as you'll learn, there's lots of ways to reach social media or utilize it. And yeah, so we're just going to dig right in. For the NASW, social media laws and regulations, it's kind of been updated and recently regulated. Um, Obviously, we know that social media has not been around for forever. So, in August of 2017, NASW Delegate Assembly released updates on the Code of Ethics pertaining to social media. Revisions include a focus on ethical challenges due to the rise in social workers and clients' use of technology. Social work practice is changing thanks to technology, and we have reached the point of needing guidance and coverage for new licensing standards, practice standards, and ethical standards. In the year 1996, that was kind of when it was the last time that the Code of Ethics was revised. And since then, there's been a lot of growth in using computers and smartphones, tablets, emails, texting, online social networking, monitoring devices, video technology, and other electronic technology in various aspects of our social work practice. So it's important to remember that many of these technologies that we take for granted today actually didn't even exist in 1996. So this kind of proves a little bit why there's a need for revision and an update of the regulations. So, what are some of the changes that can be recognized? There's about 19 that were added and revised technology related standards that the Code of Ethics covers. Um, I highlighted some of the areas because obviously we don't have enough time to just dig in and go into depth into all of them. But if you would like to research a little bit more or just kind of look up some of these things, I have added a I guess, Word document from an article that I found, and it kind of touched on a little bit more in depth some of the bullet points that I have on here. But some things that were talked about was informed consent, competent practice, conflicts of interest, privacy and confidentiality, sexual relationships, sexual harassment, interruption of services, unethical conduct of colleagues, supervision and consultation, education and training, and client records, evaluation, and research. So it's kind of a big array coverage, but all good things definitely needed to be updated and yeah, covers a lot of great things. So, research suggests that between the age of 8 to 28, a person is spending time at least 44.5 hours in a 1 week period on in front of a digital screen. That is a full-time job. So I think it's important to recognize how much that is being used, and even with things that are going on today such as COVID-19, I'm sure that these numbers, now this isn't a statistical, this is just an opinion, but I'm sure that this has doubled or at least increased from 44 hours a week. With all the time that we have, internet is really our time to be entertained, especially at a time like this. So it's kind of interesting. Some studies that have shown that about 23% of kids and teens have reported that they actually feel like they're addicted to video games. That breaks it down to 31% of males and 13% of females. So we're seeing a increase in teens usage, and not only usage, but possibly being addicted to these things that are entertaining them. Now, some of these statistics might sound like cons, and there are many benefits to using social media. I do want to take the time to recognize both sides because kids nowadays actually need the internet more than ever to research information for school projects or to just simply read and learn about things that they're interested in. Uh, Social media and the internet can be used appropriately, and it can be a very useful resource. So I don't want to put down internet or research, but a lot of statistics and a lot of things that are kind of recent clearly show an increase over the years of usage, and that most of that is going to come from it being such a new thing and new experiences and availabilities and resources online. There's clearly a reason why the internet is being used more often. And so, yeah, it's just important to remember that there are definitely pros and cons. Talking about the Children's Online Privacy Act, it's important for social work professionals to know what laws and regulations are set in place to help protect our clients. So it's also important for social workers to educate, inform, and discuss these measures that are available with the clients and their parents themselves when available. COPA gives parents control over what information websites can collect from their kids, and the COPA rule puts additional protections in place and identifies other procedures that companies covered by the rules need to follow. COPA did a really good job of creating a 6 steps compliance plan, and it's available to the general public. I think it's important to know, even if you don't like own a website or anything, it's important to know what rights and privacy acts that are out there. This can just help for education and information, and yeah. So what this six-step compliance plan is determine if your company is a website or online service that collects personal information from kids that are 13 and under. And then the second step is to post a privacy policy that complies with COPA. The third step is to notify parents directly before collecting the personal information from their kids. Step 4 says get parents verifiable consent before collecting personal information from their kids. Step 5 is to honor parents' ongoing rights with respect to personal information collecting from their kids. And step 6 is to implement reasonable procedures to protect the security of kids' personal information. Now, what exactly is a website or an online service? That would be a really good question to kind of address. So what COPA says that this is mobile apps that send or receive information online, internet-enabled gaming platforms, plugins, advertising networks, internet-enabled location-based services, voice over internet protocol services, connected toys, or other internet types of things or devices. The COPA Act applies to websites for kids, but it also may apply to sites aimed at general audiences. If you or someone you know or a website you know is questioning if it's subject to COPA, then I have added a link, and you can also find it. It'll be in the PowerPoint and in my Word document as well. But if you go to this link right here, ftc.gov, you'll be able to find a little bit more in-depth, very, very specific outline of what you can do to follow these rules in this compliance plan so that you don't get in trouble. Okay, so kind of coming off of what is important to recognize from the pros and cons of social media. I put together a little list. Some pros are means to staying connected with your friends and family, availability to volunteer or get involved with a campaign, nonprofit, or charity, freedom to enhance creativity by sharing ideas, music, and art, meeting and interacting with others who share similar interests, accessibility to communicate with educators and fellow students. And those are all great things. And then some cons that we have is that you can post photos online or use real names on profiles, options to disclose your birthday and interests, can post personal things such as your name and the town that you live in. There's been a lot of adolescents that have reported that they've been contacted by someone that they didn't know in a way that made them feel scared or uncomfortable. They've received online advertising that was inappropriate for their age, lied about their age to get access to websites, and can impact physical wellness or appropriate sleeping habits. So, if I was in a room full of professionals, I would probably ask them, have they ever experienced any of these cons, or have they ever had a child or family member that has maybe been contacted by someone that they didn't know, been friended or asked to be friended by someone that they didn't know, or any of these listed above. And so I would raise my hand and I would say, yes, a few of these things have actually happened to me before. So, and I know as an adult that if I have experienced these and I really don't spend too much time on social media, I can only imagine how many kids really are subjected to this, because I feel that the more social media that you use, the higher increase of possibility that this could be. And so I just want to say that it's not uncommon for children and adolescents to use forms of social media and have a profile on a social networking site. Many people really utilize these every single day, unless you are intentionally taking a break, or maybe you just haven't set up any social media accounts on purpose. But a typical majority of people are on social media and using them. They're good. There are many good things about social media, but also many risks that kids and teens should avoid. They don't always make good choices when they post something to a site, and this can lead to problems. It's important to talk with your clients and parents about using social media wisely. Besides problems like cyberbullying and online predators, kids can also face the possibility of a physical encounter with the wrong person. Newer apps are actually being shown to literally use a location tracking whenever they're online. So that's kind of scary to think about. This can tell anyone exactly where that they can find the person using the app. And so also photos, videos, and comments made online can't be taken back once they're posted. Even something that has been deleted, and putting an emphasis on deleted, professionals have admitted that it is possible, or that it's impossible to actually completely erase something from the internet, and just because you delete it doesn't mean that maybe someone hasn't screenshotted it, or maybe it's still somewhere in the internet database that just couldn't get removed. So that's also something to keep in mind, that posting something can actually be permanent even when we think it's not. Posting an inappropriate photo can damage your reputation and can cause problems years later, such as a potential employer or college admissions officer who's doing a background check could come across it. And sending a mean-spirited text, even as a joke, can be hurtful to someone else, and that can even be taken as a threat sometimes. So it's important to remember that even no matter who you are, what age you are, that using social media does have consequences. There's not always a negative consequence when using it, but sometimes we don't think about how it could affect others, or how it could affect our future. And spending too much time on social media can be a downer too. Seeing how many friends and others have and pictures of them having fun can make kids feel bad about themselves or feel like they don't measure up to their peers. So studies are coming out and sharing that although it is fun to get to keep up and keep in contact with others, that there are situations where people maybe don't relate or don't feel like um, the friends that they have are their equal. If they see someone that gets to do more things than them, or maybe they don't have as much, it appears that they don't have as much money as them, or things like that. Or maybe they're posting pictures with friends all the time. Maybe they don't feel like they have enough friends as someone that they know. This can really impact them emotionally, and just kind of like lower their self-esteem. And it definitely plays an impact on their mental health when this starts happening. So now I want to talk about the importance of the communication. Important the importance of this is for parents to be aware of what their kids do online, but also knowing that when a parent is trying to communicate about this, there is a difference between communicating and setting boundaries and snooping. Snooping can alienate a child and impose on the trust that maybe a parent and adult, or a child and an adult have built together. And so the key is to stay involved in a way that makes kids understand that the parent is respecting their privacy, but wants to make sure that they are safe. And even if you are just a professional talking with a kid, there's probably going to be a little bit more trust there if you have a good relationship, because at the end of the day, you're not the one. You wouldn't go through a child's phone, and you wouldn't take it away from them, things like that. So that's where a social worker can kind of like really influence a client in a positive way, and tell them like, hey, I'm just trying to look out for you. These are things that I know and I've seen and heard about and researched. So that's why it's also a great gateway for social workers or professionals to kind of discuss this with parents, and explain to them ways that they can still get information that would be important to know about their child's usage on social media, but also like building that relationship and not doing it in a way that the kid feels like they don't feel trust, or that they're kind of being put down, or being questioned. Those are all things that could push a kid away from opening up and being willing to kind of share about those things. So, considering discussing these solutions to navigating social media with parents and children, I had found this list of kind of like tips and tricks to maybe teach your parents. And so I think that this would be a really important discussion that a social worker could have with the parent. And it's just kind of little tricks and ideas of kind of conversation starters, or things that cover that hopefully, in the event that a parent might not have thought of a certain area to discuss, or like maybe aren't as educated about the internet and social media. These tips can kind of help them navigate that with their children. So, the first one I want to talk about is being nice. Let your kids know and your clients know that being mean isn't okay. And you should make it clear that you expect um, when they're online, to treat others with respect and to not post hurtful or embarrassing messages, and ask them to always tell you about any harassing or bullying messages that others post. There's a lot of um, kind of ways that uh, people are implementing and really trying to build the trust of, like, if a child witnesses something online, that they should tell someone. So kind of like bullying in person almost. It's always important for a child to tell an adult, because if it's something that they shouldn't handle, or something that would be even way too big for them to be able to handle and they don't realize it, it's just important to uh, encourage your kids to tell someone that can actually maybe find the right resources and handle it appropriately. The second thing would be to think twice before hitting enter, reminding the client that what they post can be used against them. For example, letting the world know that you're off on vacation or posting your home address could give robbers a chance to strike. Children also should avoid posting their specific location of events or even phone numbers. This is really a good thing to think about. Um, Something as simple as posting your home. I can't really think of a good reason why you would wanna do that. Um, it's just really just a smart practice to keep certain information private. You never know on social media who can come across your page or your post or anything like that. With the technology that is available today, people can share posts and do different things. And so they make a really good point whenever they're talking about how a robber could strike your home. And it could be something as simple as a kid posts their address and they go on vacation. Next thing they come back, and if they just wouldn't have posted it, then they wouldn't have known. Um, and it's fun to post that you're on vacation and things like that, but if you had previously posted your address, then that would be something to kind of think about. And just because you're away and you can't protect your home, so I think that was a really good point to be brought up. Then there's a really funny saying. I kind of like this one. It definitely applies in my family, with uh, just like how close we are and all of that, and just how conservative that my family kind of is. So there's this rule, and it's a "what would grandma say" rule. And so it says to teach kids not to share anything on social media that they wouldn't want their teachers, college admissions officers, future bosses, or even grandmas to see. I think it's funny because it's so true. Like, if you don't want your parents to see something, you probably shouldn't be posting it. It would be a good idea to not hide things from people, only post things that you wouldn't care about others seeing, or that maybe that would be approved of. That's always just a original good rule of thumb to go by. Using privacy settings. Sometimes people don't understand how much settings there are available for privacy, but the problem that I see with this on apps and social media online is that you kind of have to dig for them and search for them, and so people don't know they're really there until you start looking. So that's, I would say, a downside to using the internet, and I wish that apps and stuff like that would do a better job of promoting what they have available. And so for the privacy settings, I think it would be important to go through them together if you're a parent and a child, or a caretaker and a child, and kind of like discover what they are and discuss what they do and why they're put in place so that you and your child can understand each of them. And also, as a professional, I think it would be important to go through privacy settings so that you can educate them about that yourself, because if you know and then they have any questions, then you can hopefully maybe introduce those to them or discuss that, and or even ask them if they know of any privacy settings. That's another thing. Always like learning from our client. That is always a good idea if you have a client or a parent that might be educated in that or like have dealt with it before and maybe you're not so sure about it, or maybe you have a client who comes in and somehow the topic gets brought up of a new app that they're using, and then you can kind of like dig into that and say like, hey, like what are you doing to protect yourself on this app? Is it tracking your location? How do you feel about that? And kind of just like start those questions up and yeah, see what they know about that and kind of go from there. um it also Another thing to think about is passwords. This could be a common sense thing, but to some people they might not think about talking about this with their kids. But whenever a child or youth create a password, to discuss things and let them know that passwords are there to protect them, especially against identity theft. And they should never share their passwords with anyone, not even a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a best friend. Um, Anyone that they don't trust to share that. I think it would be appropriate to keep a list, either like a written list somewhere or a locked note in your phone about passwords, because nowadays there's so many websites and applications that ask for you to use a username and password, and so that would be a good idea to kind of keep a little journal tab running, so that you can have that information. So if you don't use the same password for everything, or maybe you change it up a little bit, or maybe you just feel like you might not remember your username, things like that. It would be good to have that and be able to keep up with that, but remembering that that is a sacred piece of paper that could really get you into a lot of trouble if someone that if given into the wrong hands gets a hold of that. They could really do some damage through the online world with those important pieces of information. um, so yeah, just another good area to kind of like discuss with your clients about that. And discussing the importance of not friending strangers. Uh, as simple as leaving it, if you don't know them, don't friend them, because you don't know who they are. Why would you want to let them into your world and give them access to potentially learn more about you when you don't even know anything about them? It also might be a good idea to consider discussing making a social media agreement. Now, this wouldn't be with like um, your clients, and like if you're a social worker and working with a client, it wouldn't be something like that. It would be more of like telling your parents, like maybe if they're having trouble communicating or really want like to set some boundaries and like some standards that would be available for their clients, I mean, for their children, and just, like, kind of, like, have something that's pretty official so it makes it feel more real. This social media agreement would be like a real contract that they can sign. In it, they can agree to protect their own privacy, consider their reputation, and not give out personal information. They would also promise not to use technology to hurt anyone else through bullying or gossip. I think that all of those areas would be great to kind of, like, draw upon, and just give the opportunity for the parent and the child to discuss some of the things that go on the contract. And that's something that you can personalize, and um, it just would help both people be on like the same ground, uh, very clear and precise and very professional. It gets kids into thinking about how serious that breaking a contract can be and would teach them a responsibility, and putting the rules and regulations up front would help them to kind of like think and be aware of their decisions that they make, and forces them to really just like think about those types of things. And maybe it could even give them an opportunity to discuss with their parents something that they didn't think about, because oftentimes, as we talked about earlier, kids don't really understand how their actions can affect others and what their actions can kind of bring out. And so sometimes we have to educate them first before they make those mistakes, and that can help go a long way. Another thing would be to put boundaries and limits on social media use. Just like in a contract setting rules and regulations, if you maybe put in there um, in the contract, like you're only allowed to use social media for a certain amount of time, or you can only be on a technology device for a certain amount of time or certain days of the week, things like that. Or you have to have all of your schoolwork completed before you can get on it for the day. Simple things like that, where you kind of like put in place what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I know that there are some apps that are now releasing timers, and Instagram, for example, has a timer, and so you set it to a certain minute or hour of how long you're limiting yourself to be on the app, and then once the time is up, it actually like pops up on your screen and says that your time is up, and that's the standard that you have set. So it kind of like kicks you out of the app. Now I do know that, yes, it is a timer that does get you out of the app, but it also can't control you from getting back into it, as we know. It's just a thing, it's like a gentle reminder. So it is a good thing. Is it foolproof? No, because you can log off and then get right back on. It's as simple as that. But the act of reminding you and saying, "Hey, like you set this," or "Hey, it's been 15 minutes. You said you only wanted to spend 15 minutes at a time on Instagram." That can go a long way, because so many times I've even personally found myself scrolling through my phone, and then next thing you know, it's like 3 hours later and I'm like, "Wow, I can't believe I wasted 3 hours online. What was I even looking at? What was even important?" Sometimes I'm reading articles or things like that, but sometimes I'm just looking and catching up about what are my friends doing, chatting with them or chatting with family members. I really keep in contact with some of my family members through social media, so you can really get lost. You can really lose your track of time on online, and so it's just a good way to kind of like set those boundaries and put that in place. Another thing would be, not only putting the limits on social media, but keeping your computers in public areas in the house, and avoiding laptops and smartphones in the bedroom, and set some rules on the use of technology, like no devices at the dinner table. So this would clearly be up to your own discretion, and all of these tips and tricks are definitely available just for like food for thought. Um, they're by no means anything that anyone has to do, and also, it might not apply to your client or the parent and the client, and their children. Um, that's the beauty of all of this, is you can kind of pick and choose what you think is appropriate, and, let them know that there's so much flexibility. And maybe if a client is showing improvement on the usage of social media, or maturing a little bit and kind of understanding like um, socially and emotionally, like the effects of using social media, and just like being more aware of things like that, you could maybe loosen some of the restrictions or increase the time that they can use. Eventually, the children and adolescents are going to grow up and have to make their own decisions themselves. So it's important to kind of consider how age and maturity might play a factor in some of these decisions. And it's obviously going to be a case by case scenario. There are definitely different stages of life and different cognitive stages of life as well. And so kind of taking it case by case and letting the parents kind of decide what they think would be appropriate and giving them the freedom to kind of explore that, and also reminding them that they might not be perfect in dealing with this, especially going back to the COVID-19 discussion. Um, in a time like this, it's probably really, really hard for parents to regulate screen time, and that's okay. It's okay. That's all that a parent needs to really hear on that matter, is that they're not going to be perfect, and if they have to let their kid use, social media or screen time, find educational videos, look at the resources that are out there that can enhance learning, things like that. Um, there, you don't have to completely limit these things, and it's subject to change because we did not expect to be in home all the time with basically nothing to do, and you can only go outside so many times without getting bored, things like that. And pulling up something as simple as an educational movie or documentary could last 2 hours, which could be enough time for the mom to clean the house or do something, take care of something that they need to, and help the kid um, relax or be kind of distracted in a safe way. Things like that. Just recognizing that parents aren't going to be perfect when they are navigating social media in the digital world, and kids aren't going to be perfect either. And there's going to be mistakes made and lessons learned, but remembering to learn from those things and interactions can go such a long way. But also, that's kind of why, like, educating and informing clients and parents of these things beforehand can hopefully lessen the learning from mistakes, and lessen the possibility of how many mistakes are made, and just help people to be aware of those things. Another area that could be important for communication is finding about online protection elsewhere. Sometimes we don't really think about how many opportunities a kid might have of getting online or using social media outside of the home or outside of supervision from the parent. Areas where you should consider is finding out if your school offers any online protection or what measures they might take for online protection. This is kind of a controversial topic today. A lot of schools are starting to move to more digital, and there's going to be a difference in the areas that have these resources, because it's really expensive and takes a lot of effort and planning and um, a lot of gathering items and such for kids to be using things online or getting technological devices. But I know of schools that are starting to give out laptops or iPads for kids to be learning and using. And now that kids are at home, they're using the Google School. Things like that, that uh, people are transitioning more to online learning, and there's a lot of great things out there. A lot of simulational learning apps and games and um, stuff that have been created that are really like directed and geared toward that online learning environment, and I think that's really great. But as a parent, it could probably be comforting to know kind of what the school might have to offer for these protections, just to give them ease of mind and also to help them be held accountable. Uh, Handing out devices and things like that is never going to be perfect. And so it's always good to just kind of like stay in that communication loop and know what's going on, hitting on what we talked about a little bit earlier, knowing what your child is doing online. I have had clients at my internship at Waco Center for Youth that were utilizing the computers, and they were actually spending time not online because their teachers weren't necessarily paying attention to what they were actually doing while they were in the classroom, and they were looking up things that they weren't supposed to be looking up. Or the teacher would say, if you get your work done, then you can go surf around the internet, things like that. And although I know it's a nice gesture to be giving these children the freedom and capacity to search the internet because they're very curious, it can also get them in trouble with trying to bypass regulations and such items that are in place to protect them. I had a client who actually was surfing the internet and then was trying to bypass the firewall. And luckily, our internship had a measure in place to kind of stop that, and it alerted the appropriate people who needed to take care of that. And it was just a situation that was very quick and harmless because the client did not know that there was going to be that regulation put in place. And so we were able to take care of it very easily. And I was able to discuss with the client kind of like, why did they do that? And what was their purpose and things like that. And so I was able to discuss with them, like how that can get them in trouble and how people might assume that they're trying to look at bad things or do bad things. Just because of if you're trying to kind of break the rules of what are in place, that doesn't look very good. And so, kind of like I heard out my client's perspective and then discussed a little bit about the adult perspective of what could be kind of assumed by the situation, and we were able to discuss that and work it out. And my client understood, and actually, it was interesting. They were really just trying to get in touch with a family member, but we don't have any availability for clients to get on any social media apps or anything that can contact people outside of the agency, because while they're in, there is very strict regulations on who can talk to them and who they can be in contact with. So that was my experience kind of. I haven't really been able to find any case studies. I really wanted to, or like specific like cases, I guess, to per se of about a client story or something that would like simulate an experience of like what would you do, or like anything tied to diagnoses. But I, I wanted to share that story with all of you and give you a little bit of insight on a client perspective and how I kind of dealt with it. Um, Unfortunately, I wasn't able to talk with the parent about this situation. That's a little bit of a rockier subject. There's not that great of communication. And so I think that's one of the main reasons why my client really was trying to reach out to a family member. But it was a good learning experience, and taught me some things about social media that I didn't even know that you can bypass certain firewalls, things like that. So that's always great to know. I feel like a lot of times kids learn really easily and they tell each other stuff, and kind of have ins and outs. So that's why I believe it's really important to kind of like stay up to date on what is out there. As scary and confusing and crazy that the online world can be, it's definitely learnable and manageable. Um, so yeah, and then also don't forget to encourage your parents to set a good example through their own virtual behavior. This can go a long way towards helping kids use social media safely because oftentimes they learn behavior, as we know. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take some water. I don't think I've talked this long in a long time, so my throat's getting a little bit dry. But, learning behaviors can either come from their peers or it can also come from parents, and oftentimes children are learning these from their parents. And so I think it's really important to recognize that and encourage that, yes, these our clients are probably going to learn some of their behaviors from their parents. And if they're friends with them on social media, no one's perfect. I've seen my dad get into arguments with people online, and that's a little bit of a self disclosure, but it's typically about politics. And it's every now and then he'll comment or share something, and then someone will just, like, keep on coming at him online, and I'm not confrontational, so I know I didn't pick up that from my dad, but it's just a good thing to remember that if I was younger, I might have seen that online and been like, "Oh, it's okay to get into it with people," because my dad is setting that example, for me per se, not purposely, and I know that he has good intentions, but, sometimes it's smarter or better to kinda keep those to yourself or in a private conversation. So, encouraging your parents to really set good standards and think about what they post too. And this is typically mostly educational for your clients and things like that. But yeah, it would just be a good idea to kind of discuss that with them. Um, Things like that. Okay. There we go. So now that we've kind of talked about like some pros and cons and importance of communicating, things like that, I figured it would be good to touch base on some of the screen time recommendations. Now, I was able to pull these from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And so they say that babies and toddlers up to 18 months do not need any screen time, but exceptions could be with video chatting with family and friends. Toddlers are going to be 18 to 24 months, and they can have some screen time with a parent or caregiver. This would be really crucial to monitor because kids are just going to type and press random buttons and don't even know what they're doing most of the time on social media. So that's just something to keep in mind. Preschoolers, no more than 1 hour a day of educational programming, and together with a parent or a caregiver who can help them understand what they're seeing. This is definitely, um, a good or not implication, a good reminder that educational programming is beneficial, but also they still might not be able to understand what they're clicking on or seeing, things like that. They're still learning and processing and trying to grow that developmental stage, that they're in. And kids and teens 15 or 5 to 18 years, parents should put consistent limits on their screen time, including TV, social media, and video games. And media should not take place of them getting enough sleep and being physically active. I've heard of people doing things such as not letting them have their phone in the bedroom at nighttime, so they keep it charging in the kitchen or in the bedroom, in the parents' bedroom, in a safe place to be monitored, or having a lock on the television so it can't be on at a certain time, or certain restrictions on what can be watched and what can't be watched. I would I would say that TV and interactive video games and the internet can be a really good source of education and entertainment, but too much screen time can have unhealthy side effects. Some of these side effects can include increased possibility of developing depression, anxiety, attention problems, such as ADD and ADHD. Uh, I know that it we've talked about this a little bit before, but I still would like to remind you that it is important as a social worker to discuss the pros and cons of using social media with the clients and educate the parents on how to navigate the social media world. This can help monitor, limit, or set boundaries for time spent playing video games and watching TV and using the internet. Kids should have a wide variety of free time, like activities such like spending time with friends and playing sports, and just overall like things that help them develop a healthy body and mind. Um, Obesity is tied to high internet and technology use, just because it's limiting kind of what kids are doing physically. And obviously, when you're watching a movie, it can be really easy to grab a snack and just want to like eat while you're watching TV. But if you watch TV all day and then you're snacking all day and not doing any physical exercise, that's going to catch up with you really quickly. So just being cognizant of what you are putting into your mouth, and how physically active you're being, or if you're balancing that, or if you're not. So there are a lot of social media monitoring apps. I felt like this would be a good thing to kind of like bring up and discuss and talk about, while um, learning about tips and tricks for navigating social media. So this would be really good information for parents to kind of be aware of. Um, there's this consumer advocate group that did some research, and they were able to find 7 of the best monitoring apps in Texas. And the unique thing about this is if you go to the website up here, they give you different apps and stuff for different states. So you can actually, although since I live in Texas and Baylor's in Texas and I'm focusing on Texas, I thought it would be appropriate to just do Texas for this. So we have Bark, Custodio, Web Watcher, Net Nanny, Family Time, Norton, and Esset. These are all based off of their features that they hold, their reputation of rankings that they've gotten, and feedback from people, and pricing. So some of them do cost, some of them are free. It just depends on what you have. But yeah, so these are some really great resources. I did put a link. It's on here, but also it is in my Word document to pass out. And if you click right down here, it says click link to visit each website. You can actually go to each website personally. So not only do you have the research that was compiled, but you also have a link for each of these websites to learn more information. And also you can just Google it and go from there. So all of that was a lot of information, right? That we covered so many things about social media and how it can impact our clients and what we can do as a professional to kind of advocate for our kids and hopefully help them to build stronger and better and more intentional relationships with their parents or caretakers. Also, hopefully this encouraged you and inspired you to be able to discuss these things with them and feel more comfortable to be able to kind of open up that conversation, or if they bring it up, to be able to kind of lead into that and let them know. I think the biggest part of social work is when it's appropriate to educate our clients and their families on the best resources that are available and the most up-to-date research. And so I know that online social media is changing every single day, but this was some of the things that I've gathered that are pretty up to date, as the best ability that I could provide. If you have any questions or any feedback or any information that you think would be appropriate to share with me, I would love to hear from you. I have put my phone number on here and also my Baylor email. I would appreciate any feedback that you have, and hopefully I was able to provide something that you didn't know about or maybe didn't think about. There is a lot of learning that can be involved with social media and the environment. And so it was a lot to cover, and definitely didn't touch everything that I wish that I could have, or was available to be able to discuss. But and I so wish that we could have a Q&A. I know things are a little bit different in times today, and if you just want to ask me any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate you so much for taking time to watching this video, and I hope once again that you learned something, that I was able to give you a little bit more insight on social media and navigating this online world that we're really, really, really living in on this today. So thank you so much, and have a great day. Hope you're staying safe out there. Thinking of you, praying for you. Yeah, thank you so much.